You did grow up playing football, soccer, in the great ocean state of Rhode Island. What are the Joe Mazzulla footballing stylings? What position were you? What kind of a bloke were you on the field?
I mean, I didn't have a lot of skill, so I usually played forward just because I was faster, or defense because I was physical. So I was, fullback and forward. But I'll tell you what, the building the connections, when I got on campus at West Virginia, I felt so much more prepared going from high school to high level basketball for two things: because of the conditioning that football gave me and the footwork. That is where I started to build, the connections between multiple sports, is the footwork and the angles that I learned, how to shield, how to make runs, how to see runs in your teammates. When I got to college, I wasn't the best talented basketball player, but those angles, that footwork, that conditioning, that gave me a way on how to create a competitive advantage through the game, and was huge for me in college.
What did you show? When did the idea of showing your Celtics players Manchester City's play, and what were you hoping they'd see in it?
Yeah, I mean, I think even before that, right, I think the journey towards how do you build connections between sports. So many times when you coach one sport, you get caught up in just looking at that. And, when you watch football, when you watch a different sport, can you find things that can help you kind of stretch your mind into, the creativity and the imagination as to what you can do within the sport of basketball. And so, football has been that for me. Pep has been that for me. And I'm obviously nowhere near, the manager that Pep is, but we share a similar beginning from the standpoint of he was coaching Barcelona's B team. I was in Maine's G League team. And when Barcelona, they're a high level team and they have an opportunity to go with a huge name, and they go with this guy that's just sitting in his organization. And, when I saw that, I kind of started studying his career, and that kind of happened to me, whereas, the Celtics had an opening and it's one of the biggest brands, and they could have easily have gone to a bigger name, and they go to this guy sitting on the back bench with no experience. And that's when I really started to dive into Pep of okay, what's the psychology of taking over such a high level brand? What's the psychology of building your coaching identity? How do you handle success right away? And so it became really a roadmap to how I wanted to go about building, a culture, a team, and, taking over greatness, so to speak.
When you're watching a football game, Joe, what's that experience like, just listening to you? Because you've said that counter-attacking football and basketball are all about the same thing, the continuum. Do you watch a football match as a football fan, or are you translating back into basketball the whole time?
Oh, translate it to basketball the whole time, and you take a look at okay, what themes can correlate? To me, it's like the pick and roll ball handler is very similar to the central midfielder who's in control of either creating something for himself or creating something for others. And, really the runs that guys are making, how do you create 2-on-1s with the different runs? And, if you look at the sport of football and basketball, especially in the NBA, because of the defensive 3 seconds and the way teams are, it's really just two matchup zones. And how are you distorting those zones? How are you creating the 2-on-1s? How are you building the triangulation? Really, it's a way to get to your best players, right? Because you take a look at what Holland's going through. You take a look at when Messi has been at his best. You take a look at, the false nine and how to just create so much in such little space. One of the things we're working on now is teams are playing zone defense more in the NBA. And what you see in basketball is the timing of your cuts are always off. And that's what the difference between football and basketball is. In basketball, you see a lot of guys cut either before the guy who has the ball sees you, or you do it too late. And so the timing of your cuts in zone is very similar to the timing of your runs in football to create that space. And so that's a huge thing that I'm always looking at.
Steve Kerr has come on this show, 9-time NBA champion. He said something similar.
If I were the czar of American basketball, and I had to say, all right, I'm in charge of youth basketball in America, I would make every player coming through the youth basketball program play football because it translates directly.
Do you agree that the sports are not so much mirrors, but the sports fundamentals sharpen each other?
No, they do. And it goes back to timing, right? Timing, angles, and footwork. And I think that's one of the best things, Pep teaches is timing of their runs. Who I miss watching is Mahrez. His timed runs on the outside were second to none. But it's at the same time as LeBron's ability to deliver the passes on time of those runs. And that connection is very similar to, a connection offensively. And stuff like that is easily transferable.
You two, as you mentioned, have struck up this really fascinating relationship. We've seen you in Manchester during the All-Star break. Pep returned the visit. He sat courtside at TD Garden, I think for game 1 of the NBA Finals against the Mavs, wearing the Celtics gear, even had his Boston hoodie and backwards hat. How did that relationship begin in real? You talked about studying him. You talked about reading into him. Does his people reach out to your people? Is the DM sliding? How does it all come together?
I don't have social media, but I reached out to him again. Like, I read a few years back The Barcelona Way. You study, take the ball, pass the ball. Again, I'm nothing to where he is as a manager, but I kind of look at professional coaching as like a triangle, very similar to the offense. And so he tactically is tremendous. He can manage talent and he can develop talent. And I think when you're taking a look at some of the best coaches of all time, they don't necessarily have a weakness. They're able to be great in the multiple areas of what is coaching. And so you take a look at him, his tactical ability, his ability to manage the best players, which I think is what separates coaches in any sport. And then the ability to take other guys and fit them into a role to where they're just as important as the best players. He has that well-roundedness. And that's something that I thought that I could really learn from. And so just studying his sustained success, studying how he, has become so well-rounded in all areas, it was just somebody that I felt like that could really help me. And so I appreciate his humility, and he's helped me so much in just all 3 of those areas. It's been a fun journey, kind of growing a relationship with him.
And in the middle of the finals, you actually thanked Guardiola for sharing his wisdom with you, said you both make each other better. I'm curious, Joe, now that you've won, can you tell us what advice did he have for you exactly?
I think when you're on the path towards trying to go after something, it's important to normalize greatness. And so the biggest thing I wanted to take from him was like, what's it like before you win as a coach, as a leader? What's it like after you win? What are the challenges that come with winning the first one? Because you're not a winner until you win. You're always studying people who have already won, and it's easy to take advice from people who have already won. But I wanted to go back and say, okay, what were you like before you won? What were you like in that space? Did you believe in yourself? Did you have doubts? Were you nervous? Were you worked up? Like, what'd you tell your team? So what were you like before you won? What were you like after you won? What are you like now that you've won? And I think learning that he's seen all those steps, right? Like the wisdom to see, okay, where are you at as a coach and a leader in these different phases of a career? And just gives you great perspective as to like, okay, if you're going to do this for a long time, here's what to expect, here's how to adapt, and here's how to look at it. And so just amazing perspective, from that standpoint.
But I did ask a number of NBA players who love the Premier League what I should ask you, Joe. And they all had a similar version of the same question. One of them, in their own words, wrote, Coach, can you give a real NBA example, an NBA reality that you've gotten Pep's insight into?
The NBA reality is like, basketball, I think, is just as a fluid sport as football is. And winning the transitions, winning the counterattacks, winning the margins. But really, it's like the 2 sports are very similar, that no possession is the same anymore. And so, there used to be game plans, and it was execute the game plan. And it was like, this is the game plan. You have to do this. But the way the talent is now, the way the skill, the speed of the game, it's almost like you're looking at the game as problem solving. One of the cool things that Pep and I talked about was like how long it takes him to recognize an adjustment and communicate that adjustment to his players. Like the interesting thing about football is like if you see a coach have to make an adjustment, it may take 4 minutes to get that adjustment to somebody. So he was explaining to me how quickly he sees what needs to be the adjustment and how quickly you can get that to your team so that you don't have to wait till halftime to make that tactical adjustment. Can you make it before? And I think basketball is headed that way just because, no one possession is the same. So you may have to guard a certain player or action this way for 3 possessions, and you may have to change the way you do it 2 possessions later. And the fluidity of that. So I think getting the guys to understand that the game is more of a read and a free-flowing game where every possession is its own entity within this sport of where you do have to execute some details all the time. And how do you open up your mind to reading the game and not having an assumption that the game is supposed to go a certain way, right?
How often do you speak to Pep in season?
Not as much in season. I'd probably say maybe, once or twice a month. We both kind of get lost in the work. But really, I think it's to the point where now we care more about how each other's, families are doing and how we're doing as, not necessarily as coaches, just how we're doing as people, because the job it can be difficult, it could be hard. And I think you have to have people in the same world as you that you can rely on and talk to about other things besides. So I think, our relationship has transitioned from more football to, how are you doing as a person? How are you doing as a leader? How your family's doing? Stuff like that. And when I watch each sport, I see the other sport in itself. When I see a center in basketball, I see a certain position in football. When I see certain offenses, I see counterattacks. And so the games are so fluid and they're very different, but they're also very similar, cerebrally, mentally, tactically, that I think is just, those are the connections that we're building.
How deep does the connection between the sports go? One of the co-owners of the Celtics, Stephen Pagliuca, also owns the quite magical Atalanta of the Italian Serie A. A team like yours has an on switch that never flicks off, hard charging, turbo engine, all in. The coach, grey-haired genius Gian Piero Gasperini. They talk in the organisation about have one club inform the other. Have you spent time with Gasperini? Can you benefit from coaching, man management, the data side?
Oh, no questions. I think it's really cool that we have that joint ownership and seeing it from different ways. So Gasperini's come to a shoot around and they're, the coolest thing that we've been intertwining is like the analytics department, right? Like you're seeing the growth of analytics in football where it's growing in basketball. And so, they've developed their analytics team and they've come over. And, I think the other piece to, football that we haven't mentioned is like the youth development, right? I think youth development in football is so far beyond what it is in basketball because of the structure of how it's set up. So, meeting with Atalanta's development team and how you get, a youth program, it's very similar to, having a G League team, but really the sport in general. How do you get these 10, 11, 12-year-olds early to where you can prepare them to be great footballers? And, even in Abu Dhabi, we went to Manchester City's academy, and these teams now have academies all over the world. Like, it's not just in one place. And so the connectivity, the leadership, the organization, the communication of building youth developments, I think is super important. And Atalanta is doing a great job of kind of investing into their youth development, and you're kind of seeing some of that.
But you mentioned data and how far behind it is in football. Daryl Morey, the Philadelphia 76ers GM, has talked about how the NBA is 10 years behind Major League Baseball and football is 10 years behind the NBA. But it is leaking in. You can see how set pieces have become such a massive part of the game, almost drawing up plays like NBA inbounds plays that can give you a marginal advantage to score off a corner. Arsenal pioneers this season. Some of their players have come on and said they have almost NFL playbooks worth of moves. When you watch Arsenal, Gabriel, Saliba, Declan Rice running their set plays, do you watch, in your mind, players running off screens and thinking Premier League soccer has only just begun to scratch the surface?
That's another connectivity really between American football and basketball are the set pieces, right? And I think you've seen Arsenal take advantage of that. Arsenal has done a great job of setting like almost back screens on set pieces to where you're now pinning a guy and then getting cut behind with the back screen. So you're seeing that. And from a football perspective, like the pre-snap motion is an ability to change matchups, is an ability to create space. And you're seeing it's like almost a pass interference, but it's like a crossing route to where you just knock the defender off his route a little bit. Another way to create space and runs. And so it's just another beautiful way to see a connection between different types of sports, American football, basketball, they're all there.
You've won an NBA championship. You won it at age 35. You are, for everything that you say that this doesn't matter, you are propelled by just a fiery inner core. You're deeply competitive. You've got a dogged commitment to your path, your methods. Obviously, you've already hinted you're not satisfied with just where you are. When you've got a rare quiet moment, how do you define success in life?
That's a great question, right? And I think how you define it is like after you're ever fortunate enough to win one, it really tests why you do what you do. I think that's the growth, right, of a person is like you achieve something that you want to achieve, and then you're kind of like, okay, now what? And now it tests, what are we really in this for? Are we in this for the end result of the glory, or are we in it for the space between it, right? The successes, the failures. We've had a on some scale, a relatively difficult 2 months of a season. That's why you're in the competitive arena. You're in the competitive arena to do things together, to make the most of what you have, to impact people, and to handle the good and the bad. I think that's what success really is. It becomes defined about who you become along the journey, not only as a person, but yourself, right? And why do you do what you do? And, so I think that's what success is like the having a true understanding of what your purpose is and why you're in the competitive arena. And how long can you maintain that for?